Hi everyone, welcome to the Movieception Show. My name is Fariba, and considering that this is the eve of the Oscar nominations, I decided why not to just kind of discuss what is basically my predictions for not just the nominations, but also kind of just leading up to the Oscars. I've been meaning to do this for a while now, and since the nominations are going to be coming out tomorrow morning, I felt maybe I wanted to just give my sort of my input into what could be not just potential nominations but also some of the winners. So yeah, without further ado, let's get right down to my Oscar predictions for 2023. All right, so this is how I'm going to do my breakdown of my predictions for tomorrow's Oscar nomination ceremony. What I'll do is I'll kind of use the Golden Derby as my way of just showing my picks, just to make it easier for me to just go one by one. I'm not going to cover all 23 categories. I'll actually do my final predictions closer to the Oscars, but for now, I'm just going to cover some of the more of the bigger categories, although I will kind of go quickly through a couple of them just to kind of give a bit of my, of my analysis, my input on what I think are not just going to be nominated, but also could be potential winners going to the Oscars. Again, I'm not going to go too deep into it, but yeah, this is kind of my pick so far. This is what I've submitted. So just a quick bit, best animated features. I mean, I think it's pretty clear that we're going to see movies like Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, Turning Red, Marcel the Shell with Shoes On, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, and Wendell and Wild. I think that's basically been the 5 films that have been, that have been hitting the nominations, have been getting the spots for Best Animated Feature. I think it's pretty clear that the front runner is going to be Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. So I feel like that's going to kind of be, the front runner. I feel like that's going to be the winner of the night. Pretty clear one. This one is a pretty easy one to deal with. That's just my picks for Best Animated Feature, because again, it's just been a pretty, easy ride when it comes to predicting or figuring out who's going to win Best Animated Feature. As for Best Visual Effects, I put Avatar: The Way of Water, Top Gun: Maverick, The Batman, All Quiet on the Western Front, and Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. I know that one's kind of a weird pick for me to put in, but I mean, aside from the 4, I mean, I feel like that was just kind of a wild card for me, so I'm not really guaranteed that Black Panther is going to get it, but I think it's pretty clear who's going to win Best Visual Effects. It's going to be Avatar for the night. There's no doubt about it. Avatar is going to win. I don't think there's any other film that's really topped the visual effects in the way that Avatar: The Way of Water has done it. I don't even think Top Gun: Maverick or The Batman can even compete against Avatar. I think it's pretty clear that Avatar: The Way of Water is going to be it's going to be the winner of the night if anything else happens, but I doubt that that's going to be the case. I feel like that's going to be a pretty clear run for there. Best sound, I put Top Gun: Maverick, Elvis, Avatar: The Way of Water, All Quiet on the Western Front, and Everything Everywhere All at Once. I think, again, pretty clear idea. I think given that this Oscar, there's going to be a lot of the technical categories, I already predict that Top Gun: Maverick is going to really, take home a lot of the awards because of their technical achievements. When you look at a film like Top Gun: Maverick, like a lot of what really made this film so incredible is just the technical aspects of it, right? Whether it be the cinematography, the visual effects, the practical effects, the way that you're hearing the production, the way that you're hearing the sound of those fighter planes zooming around in the air, and the fact that it is based on practical effects. I mean, the big part of that means having to make sure that you have the sound system for that to really capture just what it's like to fly in one of those what was it, 18, 19 planes. I don't know the actual plane names, but those fighter planes. And I feel like, again, this one's a pretty clear and cut, easy win. It's going to be Top Gun: Maverick. We'll see later on, like, if that changes, but I mean, I feel like Top Gun: Maverick takes the spot for it. I could still see Elvis, Avatar: The Way of Water, All Quiet on the Western Front, and Everything Everywhere All at Once. I think all those films are deserving of some sort of recognition for their best sound. I mean, Elvis, because of the fact that it is incorporating Elvis's music with Avatar. I mean, it is the Avatar world, and then All the Quiet Front. I mean, it makes sense because it is going to take place in a World War setting, right? So, but again, I think when it comes to best sound, it's going to be Top Gun: Maverick that's going to take home the award. I feel like that's the one I'm more confident with in terms of what's going to happen in terms of the night. let's go into best production. So best production, this one I put Babylon, Elvis, Avatar: The Way of Water, Black Panther, and The Fablemans. Um, I know that this one's gonna be a bit of a competitive one, but I think going into the night right now, my top pick is Babylon, just because when you look at that film, a big part of what that movie is about is production, just the studios. Like it's literally what is the clear cut, like capturing what is Hollywood, and I think that's a big part of where if you're going to capture something like the silent era, then you would need to make sure that you're capturing kind of that era, whether it be the studios, the way that things were produced. And I feel like Babylon is basically the clear cut case in terms of having this immense production design. I feel like that was kind of what that was what the whole movie was catered towards anyways, just showing the beauty of how cinema has changed. And so I think that in that case right now I put Babylon as my number one. I think Elvis could still, compete against it, as well as some of the other categories like Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, Fablemans, and Elvis. I think for now I'm gonna be leaving up Babylon as my number one pick to, win this category. But I'll discuss more about that when we get closer to the Oscars and see if things change from there. And again, best score. So best score, we have Babylon, The Fablemans, The Banshees of Inisherin, Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, and Woman Talking. Again, I feel like for me, when I was going to this film, like I knew from instant that the score was beautiful, right? I mean, just to hear all that jazziness of like what's going on, like especially that opening sequence, where they have that party, like just hearing all that jazz music just playing in the background, just rejuvenating everything. I feel like Justin Horowitz is probably one of the strongest contenders in this category to win for Babylon. I believe he had won a Golden Globe for it, although again, anything could happen with this, but I think someone else had won. I think, what was it, I believe it was the Fablemans, where I think they had taken home the Critics' Choice. So there's still some competition with regards to that, but as of the moment, I put Babylon as my number one pick for potentially winning that category. Again, just a quick thing around there, and yeah, we'll see how things go. Again, this could change by the time we get to the Oscars, or by the week of the Oscars, and see how things play out as we start to see more of the individual award ceremonies, like the visual effects, the PGA, the WGA, all that sort of breakdown, and see kind of where everything stands from there. Best song, I feel like this is a pretty easy category itself. I have RRR, Natu Natu, Lift Me Up, Black Panther from Wakanda Forever, Hold My Hand from Top Gun Maverick, Ciao Papa for Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, and then I also have Taylor Swift's Carolina, where the crowd all sing. I feel like this is probably a solid list that we're gonna see as nominations. I'm not gonna be surprised if Lady Gaga and Rihanna get the nomination, but let's be clear, the song that's really been been the bop for everyone has been Natu Natu from RRR. I feel like that's been the movie that's really been, having a clean sweep right now in terms of the nominations that we've been seeing so far. They've won the Golden Globes, they've won the Critics. I would not be surprised if they win the Oscar for it. And that's coming for the fact that this is the only, award, the only category that they're going to be nominated for, because they were not submitted by India for best international film. So this will be their only, nomination for this Oscar, and it's pretty clear Natu Natu is probably going to be winning. I don't see any other category really, competing against it. But again, we'll see how things play out as we get closer. And so let's really start getting more down to the latter categories. So best makeup and hairstyling, I put Elvis, The Whale, Batman, Wakanda Forever, and Babylon. I feel like that's pretty solid pick of what could be the potential nominees. I think it comes down to between Elvis and The Whale, I believe. Although I may have missed, I would not be surprised if Everything Ever All at Once can, dethrone over Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, or even Batman, or any of the other ones I picked. I would not be surprised if Everything Ever All at Once does kind of sneak into the final nominations. Again, I'm not super solid with who's going to win at this point. I put Elvis at the meantime, because again, it is a movie where it is trying to dedicate itself to be as accurate as possible because it is based upon Elvis Presley, which means that if you're going to be doing that, you need to make sure that you are embodying the image that is Elvis Presley, right? I feel like that's why I put it as my number one choice at the moment. I would not be surprised if the whale can potentially take the award. So I will see how that one goes out, but I do think for sure that Elvis the Whale is going to be nominated, as well as the Batman, Wakanda Forever, and Babylon. But I would not be surprised if Everything Everywhere All at Once grabs one of the spots in tomorrow's nominations. So let's go to Best Film Editing: Top Gun: Maverick, Everything Everywhere All at Once, Elvis, All Quiet on the Western Front, and the Fabelmans. Again, this is a pretty solid pick. I don't think I would change this. I think this is what I would expect to see for tomorrow's nominations. I would not be surprised if Avatar managed to steal a spot. I would say I would not be surprised if it takes it over the Fabelmans or All the Quiet on the Western Front. But I think that because we are going into the Oscars and they're definitely a bit more, open to like more international films, I feel like All Quiet on the Western Front is going to get a bit more recognition, and therefore that means having to topple movies like Avatar or Woman Said or anything like that, right? So I think that this is what I feel like it's going to be a solid list for it. As at the moment, I put Top Gun Maverick as my top choice. I think at this point, again, I think Top Gun Maverick is going to be winning most of the technical awards of the night. And I feel like film, if it's not, one is going to be sound. Of course, they're going to have film editing because because of the fact that this is a film that really focused on practical effects and trying to design sort of what's going on in this film, whether it be just to get the fighting sequences up. I feel like for Top Gun Maverick, they really, really do such a great job with just editing the pieces and putting everything together. And I feel like this is where Top Gun Maverick is again going to be taking home one of the big prizes again for a technical award. But anything could still happen. I feel like Everything Ever All at Once still has a way to, be a challenge to Top Gun Maverick. It's just, again, I'm gonna be keeping an eye on this moving into some of the more individual awards when we get to some of the more separate awards closer to the Oscars. But as of the moment, I have Top Gun Maverick. That's my top pick at the moment, who I think is going to win, but we'll see how that goes as we get closer to the Oscars. And then, of course, Best Costume Design, I put Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, Elvis, Babylon, The Woman King, and Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris. I feel like Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris has been a movie that not a lot of people have been talking about. It's been pretty overlooked last year. I was fortunate enough to have seen it, and I would not be surprised if Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris gets a nomination, because a big part of what that movie is basically about costuming. It's basically about fashion, more so kind of the 1950s fashion. So when you think about costume design and trying to be, accurate in terms of what's going on, again, I believe they were trying to design a Christian Dior dress. So with that in mind, I would not be surprised if Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris somehow, snatches up a spot for that reason, which means having to take it over Everything Everywhere All at Once, in my opinion. I would not be surprised if Everything Everywhere All at Once does get a spot in tomorrow's nomination. We'll see about that. But I think as we're going into the Oscars, it's pretty clear who's going to win. It's going to be Ruth E. Carter for Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. She did win the award for that in 2019, when Black Panther was getting a lot of these nominations, and I think that that's going to be the case again. I believe Ruth Carter did win the Golden Globes as well as the Critics' Choice, so I think as of this moment, she is going to be the top contender for this category. And I would not see anybody. Again, if there's going to be any sort of competition, it might be Elvis, but I highly doubt it. I think Black Panther: Wakanda Forever is going to be sealing that win on Oscar night. Again, we'll see how things work out as we get closer to the Oscars. And so now we're getting down to sort of the big awards. So Best Cinematography, I have Top Gun Maverick, All Quiet on the Western Front, Avatar, Fabelmans, and Elvis. Again, I'm going to have to put my number one pick as of the moment, Top Gun Maverick. When it comes to looking at a movie like Top Gun Maverick, one of the things that really made Top Gun Maverick such a beautiful film is just the visuals, right? Like the scenery of everything that you're getting from some of the shots, from the fighting sequences, or even as we're getting more into more tense situations on the ground, right? The way that the scenes are done so pristinely, right? I think that that really captured why a lot of people were just enamored with everything that was going on this film. It's particularly, again, you're watching all these like these fighter pilot sequences and just the amazing visuals that you're seeing, whether it be the close-up shots, whether it be the far shots. And this is a film that, again, really nails it in terms of not just the technicals, but particularly just the way that they're really capturing the moment on the screen, like whether be showing just how intense the high stakes are. And I think that in this case, like Top Gun Maverick really exceeds it with the cinematography. And I think that I feel like for this case, like again, Top Gun Maverick's going to be the top contender. I mean, if there's gonna be any sort of competition, I could see All the Quiet on the Western Front or even Fablemans, but honestly, like Top Gun Maverick is gonna be the one to beat, and as of the moment, that is my number one choice. I think the other ones I do have for nominations are pretty solid as well. But again, I'll keep an eye on and see what's going to happen as we get closer to the Oscars. Again, I think I'm pretty, confident that Top Gun Maverick is going to win Best Cinematography. That I've been saying that for a long, long time. That really hasn't changed my opinion in a while now, and I'm still sticking to my guns that Top Gun Maverick's probably going to be winning Best Cinematography for the night. Again, the movie's so technically well done that it's really hard to just challenge a movie like Top Gun Maverick in a lot of these categories. All right, so now we're getting down to more of the nitty gritty stuff. Best Original Screenplay, I have put Banshees of Inisherin, Everything Ever All at Once, The Fablemans, Tar, and Babylon. I know the Babylon one is a very controversial pick for me to have put in, but one of the reasons why I did put Babylon in some of them, and you'll see as I go more into some of my other categories, my predictions for the other categories, that Babylon does show up quite often. And a lot of that goes to the fact that, well, when we do look at the Academy Award, voter registration, their list, right? A lot of them are older voters, so they're going to be more dedicated to sort of just the not just technical stuff, but like some of the more Oscar baity things, like stories that are more focused on Hollywood, things that are biopics, things like that, right? And I think that because Babylon was so dedicated to really showing the history of like cinema, right? Like acting as like a love letter to cinema and just the way that cinema has changed since the silent era to now. That's a big part of what the story is about. I mean, a lot of the influence as you go into that film, like Babylon, like they literally, like even Damien Chazelle literally utilizes a screen, like utilizes a movie as just as like its as its blueprint for just what the whole structure of the film was going to be about, to at least allow him to kind of dedicate this love for cinema, right? I feel like that is something that's going to get a lot of the older voters to vote for, Babylon, at least to get like a nomination. In terms of just the actual win, I'm putting the Banshees in a Sharon, although I could see Everything Everywhere All at Once competing against Banshees. I mean, for my personal sense, I would pick Everything Everywhere All at Once, but because we are dealing with like the Oscar voters and their list, right? We are dealing with older voters. I can see Banshees and Sharon really toppling over Everything Everywhere All at Once. But I think for what I have, I think the four that I have are pretty solid picks of what are going to be the nominees. Babylon is definitely more of a wild card for me, just because again, I'm thinking more so of the voters who are voting and kind of what the movie was able to give that that makes it worthy of an Oscar award, or at least a worthy of a nomination. I think that Babylon might seem as a really dark horse, sort of an odd choice, but I would not be surprised if Babylon does grab a nomination just because of the way that the voters are voting. So, but again, I could be wrong, we'll see about that. But regardless of that, I think right now when we are looking at this category, it's going to be it's going to be a contest between the Banshees of Inisherin and Everything Ever All at Once. I can see the Fablemans kind of hitting up there a little bit, but I don't really see this being a three-way tie, like a three-way competition. It's going to be between Banshees and Everything Everywhere. So we'll see about that. I'll keep an eye on this one because it's going to be one of the more challenging, categories getting closer to the Oscars. Typically for me, what I always, realized is that a lot of times a movie that wins the screenplay, whether it be adapted or original, typically wins Best Picture. So that's why this one's gonna be a really tough one, because if Banshees does win, then that means that that's kind of a 50-50 against whoever is going to win. And I believe this is what original, so it's gonna be 50-50 against adapted, which I'm about to go in a second, but definitely gonna be keeping an eye on this one. This one is probably where I'm gonna be having a bit more of a discussion about in terms of who could win, just because this one is a bit more of a tight race between two films that are very deserving of winning this category. So, but regardless, since this is just nominations, this is all I have so far, and I'll be keeping a close eye on this category and seeing how things work out, especially when we get to the WGA and start to see who actually starts winning from those categories, and that will probably give us a better picture of who could potentially win the big categories, right? So definitely want to keep an eye on, but right now I have Banshees of Inisherin as a top spot, along with Everything, Fableman's Tar, and Babylon as my wild card. Up next, I have Best Adapted Screenplay. So, this is really interesting because again, the picks I have are She Said, All Quiet on the Western Front, Woman Talking, The Whale, and Glass Onion. And as you all know, I'm a huge, fan of the Knives Out series. I love Glass Onion so much, although not as much as Knives Out, but definitely been a franchise that hasn't really been getting a lot of love in terms from the Oscars. At least this year they did get a nomination for best adapted screenplay at the Golden Globes, and I don't remember if Glass Onion won. I don't think they won. I think it may have been The Whale. I have to look that up, but I feel like, again, whoever does win, it doesn't seem like it's going to be a big part of the discussion of who's going to win Best Picture. Again, this is where I'm going to be looking at Best Original Screenplay at that point, because that's going to be the pinnacle of really deciding on who's going to win Best Picture. Just considering, like, who I have listed, I don't really think they're going to be strong contenders for the top 10 spots. But for the meanwhile, I did put Glass Onion as my number one spot. I think that at least Glass Onion will get a nomination. I would not be surprised if The Whale or Woman Talking, would end up winning a spot for it, which again, I'll discuss more about that as we get closer. We'll just end up seeing how the Oscar nominations goes. I think this is the one where it could go either way, any of the 5 picks for Best Adapted Screenplay, because again, like, considering that the most competitive area is going to be in Best Original Screenplay, which is where they decide, which basically does decide the Best Picture winner, it's going to be one to be keeping an eye out for this Oscar. But yeah, that's what I have so far. Again, anything could still happen. I could still see Woman Talking even winning. I believe Woman Talking may have been the one that won at the Golden Globes. I have to double check that. But yeah, that's what I have for the picks. And now we're gonna go right down into some of the more, the big 6 categories. So the actors, the directors, and Best Pictures. So we're gonna start off with Best Supporting Actor. I have Ki Hu Kwan for Everything Ever All at Once, Brendan Gleeson for The Banshees of Inisherin, Barry Keoghan for The Banshees of Inisherin, Paul Dano for The Fabelmans, and Eddie Redmayne for The Good Nurse. I think that has basically been the solid 5 choices that we've seen so far in this category. I don't think there hasn't been any sort of contest that, will put one person in, one person out. I think this is probably the solid choice we're going to see going to Oscars. If anybody's going to miss the spot, I can see Eddie Redmayne not getting the spot. He can be, maybe I could see, Brad Pitt taking over Eddie Redmayne's spot for, the final 5 nominations. But even that being the case, I think it's pretty clear that the top choice as of this moment is going to be Ki Hu Kwan, because again, he's just been dominating the award ceremony. His story has been just incredible. The comeback that he had gone through after like 30 years of his acting hiatus, and just to see him get so much love so far in this award ceremony, I would not be surprised if Ki Hu Kwan wins. If there's going to be any sort of competition, any sort of contestant, it's maybe going to be Brendan Gleeson for The Banshees of Inisherin, but I feel like for this one, I'm pretty set on Ki Hu Kwan. We'll see kind of how things play out at the SAGs. And if he does win that, I think that it's pretty, at that point, it's going to be a clear case like Ke Huy Quan's going to be winning Best Supporting Actor. But that's what I have so far. I think this is what I think is going to be the final nominations for Oscars 2023. If there's anybody who's going to be kicked out of this list and may be overthrown by someone else, I could see Brad Pitt maybe getting in there, but and maybe Eddie Redmayne not getting that spot. But again, it's gonna be mostly Ke Huy Quan's night, but we'll see how things run out with that. And then for Best Supporting Actress, again, a pretty clear-cut category. I have Angela Bassett for Wakanda Forever, Carrie Condon for The Banshees of Inisherin, Hong Chau for The Whale, Stephanie Hsu for Everything Ever All at Once, and Carey Mulligan for She Said. This one, I think in terms of who's going to win, I think it's pretty clear cut that the front runner is going to be Angela Bassett. She's been, sweeping it out so far. She won the Critics' Choice. She's won the Golden Globes. If she wins the SAGs, I think that's going to be pretty set on that she's going to win the Oscar for it. If there's anybody who's probably going to be a competition, it's going to be Carrie Condon, because again, I think when we look at a movie like Banshees and Inisherin, that's going to capture a bit more of the older voters, but we'll see how that goes. I know that Hong Chau hasn't really been getting a lot of love in terms of the, in terms of just like the awards, season, but I mean, honestly, for someone who has seen The Whale, like, she was just incredible in that film. I feel like it's her performance has been so underrated that I feel like this is one of the cases where I can see the Oscars really redeeming themselves with one of the nominations being, Hong Chau. Just again, because I feel like a lot of the award ceremonies have been awarding, or at least recognizing Chau's performance in the film, and I think that she definitely has a stronger chance of getting the nomination here, just because it is a much larger pool of voters when it comes to the Oscars. So I hope that she does get the nomination. I know a lot of people are talking about Jamie Lee Curtis getting one of the nominations, so I would not be surprised that she gets in. I know a lot of people are actually putting Jamie Lee Curtis as the pick for Best Supporting Actress. I personally believe that Stephanie Hsu is more deserving of this award because she does put in a really strong performance in Everything Everyone All at Once. I mean, she is the one who is playing against Michelle Yeoh, right? I mean, no offense to Jamie Lee Curtis, I love her. She's a great actress. I will not be surprised if both Hsu and Jamie do get a nomination, if it means kicking out someone like Hong Chau or even Carey Mulligan. But if it comes down to either or, I would personally want Hsu, just because, again, the performance that she puts into this film is just incredible, in comparison to what Jamie Lee Curtis's character does in the film. But again, I hope that it is going to be Stephanie Hsu if it comes to either or case. I will not be surprised if both of them get nominated, both of them get the spot. But that will also mean that I think this is where we kind of see a bit more of like a leeway of who's going to get the spots. I would not be surprised if Chau or Carey Mulligan don't get the nomination, although Condon and Bassett are pretty set on, like, I think they're pretty locked to get at least a nomination. But everyone else, anything can really happen. everything can really happen, but anything can really happen. I do expect at least one of the Everything Everywhere cast members to get the supporting role. I believe it's going to be Stephanie Hsu in my opinion, but we'll see when we get closer to tomorrow's nominations and get the final list of nominations from there. All right, and now we're getting down to the big awards. So, Best Actor, I have Austin Butler. I'm gonna repeat that. Sorry. I have Austin Butler for Elvis, Colin Farrell for The Banshees of Inisherin, Brendan Fraser for The Whale, Bill Nighy for Living, and Jeremy Pope for The Inspection. In terms of just the nominations itself, the top four I have are pretty set on. I think they're locked to get the nomination. I think the question is going to be who's going to get that fifth spot. Just because that has kind of been the question of going into this award season, who's going to get that fifth spot. There's been Adam Sandler, there's been Jeremy Pope. I believe Jeremy Pope got a nomination at the Golden Globe, so I put Jeremy Pope as a nomination. I believe he may have been nominated the Critics' Choice. I am not 100% on that, but this, I think the fifth choice is going to be actually, I do not think he did. I think it was Paul Mescal from Aftersun. So this one is, I think this one's gonna, I think when it comes to the final spot, who's going to take that fifth spot is going to be where we're gonna see a bit more of like a leeway. Like I feel that one's not really set in stone. I believe it might be Jeremy Pope just because there's been so much talk about his performance. Again, he did get the Golden Globe nomination. I believe he did get the SAGs as well. So I'm gonna be set on with the fact that Jeremy Pope is probably going to get the fifth spot. But in terms of the actual who's going to win itself, this is probably going to be the most competitive category going into the Oscars. After Best Director and Best Picture, I think this is a pretty stacked nomination that we're gonna see at the Oscars for Best Actor. Typically, whenever I see this, it's usually the other way around with Best Actress, because usually it's the Best Actress one I've seen be very competitive, be the most competitive of the award ceremonies. But here it's been reversed. I believe last year it was like really competitive. This year now it's Best Actor. It's gonna be a three-way between Austin Butler, Colin Farrell, or Brendan Fraser. Austin Butler won the Golden Globe, Brendan Fraser won the Critics, and Colin Farrell also won the Golden Globes for the comedy section. So it's going to be a very tough one. This is probably going to be the most competitive of all the categories that we're seeing, because we are looking at three solid actors who are going to win. No offense to Bill Nighy. I mean, I haven't watched The Living, so I can't comment about it, but I mean, it's pretty clear cut that Bill Nighy's not going to win. It's going to be between Austin Butler, Colin, or Brandon. Again, it's really incredible that we've gotten to this point where it could be any of not just two, but three potential actors on winning a award in a single category. And I think that any of these three, whoever do win, I mean, I feel like everyone's gonna be happy about it. I think personally for me, given just how the way that the Oscars really does their voting, just the way that we have the sort of the demographic of the Oscars, I put Austin Butler as of the moment as my top choice of winning. Like as of this moment, who I think has the best potential winning, just because there has been a lot of talks about his performance, the fact that he did he did emulate Elvis Presley, and again like the fact that he's managed to capture just his charms, the southern accent, the mumbliness, his moves. I feel like that really puts him in a way that we're kind of having this Bohemian Rhapsody sort of situation like we had with Rami Malek, where he was playing someone like Freddie Mercury and embodying kind of who he is and his physique and his personality, right? And I feel like in my case, and in this case, I feel like this is what we're gonna see with Austin Butler, with his nomination for Elvis, just because again a lot of what I saw with Bohemian Rhapsody is kind of a repeat of what I'm seeing with Elvis. And I feel like that's where I think that Austin Butler might have a much stronger chance of winning this category, and I could see a lot of the older voters gearing towards him as well. I would not be surprised if Colin though just comes out of nowhere and wins this category as well, because again I think when it comes to Banshees and Sharon, Banshee does also cater to a much older audience, a much older demographic, which again I would not be surprised if a lot of that subgroup ends up supporting Colin Farrell. I know a lot of people are hoping Brendan Fraser does win this award, just because again just his heroic story, just his comeback as well, like in similar with Ki Hu Kwan, we're seeing with Brendan Fraser, and even for him, it's even deeper, sentimental situation with him, because he had been blacklisted for almost 2 decades, and for him to come back and show one of his strongest performances in a movie like The Whale, right, just to show this emotionality that his character is going through. That also does not leave out Brandon in this contest as well. Again, he did win the Critics' Choice Awards for Best Actor, so that's kind of where he's back in the game as of this point. I will be looking, if anything, I feel like the best idea of who's going to win this category is going to come down to the SAGs to really just to really determine who's probably going to have the strongest chance of winning. If it ends up being Austin Butler, I would say at that point that Austin Butler is going to be winning the Oscar for this. If it ends up being Colin or Brandon, then it's gonna be anybody else at this point. Like any one of these three can win. Yeah, this is probably the one that's gonna be the toughest of them all, just because of how how competitive it is. Just again, it's not just two, but three people who are all equally deserving of this award, which is a very rare case to see. But I look forward to seeing how this category goes, and I'll be keeping an eye on some of the other awards, whether it be the SAGs and all that case. So definitely the one that I think a lot of people are gonna be keeping an eye on for the next month and a half leading up to the Oscars. All right, and let's get down to Best Actress. I have Kate Blanchett for Tar, Michelle Yeoh for Everything Everywhere All at Once, Danielle Deadwyler for Till, Michelle Williams for The Fabelmans, and Olivia Colman for Empire of Light. I think for my opinion, I think of course the first two are pretty solid, pretty locked in for the nominations. Danielle Deadwyler, I hope she does get it. I feel like the fact that the Golden Globes missed out on her was a big missed opportunity. Because again, I feel like if you haven't seen her performance, I recommend you do. She puts in so much heart and soul into playing, Mamie Till in this film. I think she's very deserving of getting this nomination. I feel like the Oscars is probably going to be the one award ceremony that really redeems sort of that mistake that's been happening so far in the award ceremony. I believe she did get a SAG nomination, so I think at this point she's pretty set on with getting a nomination for the Oscars. But I wouldn't, again, I'm not, I'm not super I'm not 100% confident that she'll get the nomination. I feel like I'm pretty much 90% on it. I feel like I'll feel like she'll get the nomination for sure tomorrow. We'll see about that tomorrow. But I think that she is probably going to be one of the more stronger ones to get the nominations. Just again, despite kind of the mistakes from the Golden Globes. Michelle Williams, again, I feel like that's kind of been a name as well that's going to probably stick around as well for Best Actress. I believe that's how she's been campaigning for the longest time, or at least what the team of The Fabelmans have been campaigning her for Best Actress instead of Best Supporting Actress. I think that, again, I feel like that's probably one of the more solid ones that will get the nominations. Not super 100% on that, but I think that she's definitely a bit more in a more comfortable position than the last one, which is Olivia Colman for Empire of Light. I feel like the fifth one, I feel like that her spot in getting nominations is probably going to be the most questionable one, because she hasn't been consistently getting nominations. I don't believe she got nominated at the Critics' Choice. I do not recall the SAGs at the moment. I believe she did get a nomination at the BAFTAs though. She did get a nomination from the Golden Globes, but this one's going to be a tricky one. I feel like the last spot is going to be, it could go to anyone at this point. It could be Olivia Colman. From the end of the day, just because again she is a Oscar darling. She has been nominated so many times at the Oscars. She's even won an Oscar a couple of years ago for The Favorite. I feel like because of the fact that she is considered one of the top actresses of all time, that I would not be surprised if she manages to get the fifth spot. Again, I feel like that's going to be the one that's going to be a bit more of just, it could go 50-50 with anything, but I feel like this is where I think it's going to be the set in stone nomination for Best Actress tomorrow. In terms of who's going to win, I think, I mean, there's really no competition. I feel like it's pretty clear who's going to win. It's going to be Kate Blanchett. If you've seen the movie, you'll know that when it comes to Tar, the whole situation with Tar is that her character is basically like the whole point of the movie is as a character study of Lydia Tar, right? And when you watch this film, the way that Kate Blanchett really exudes the energy of who she is as Lydia Tar, it makes you feel as if this person is actually real, which is insane because I feel like a lot of people did get that confused thinking that this was a biopic when really it was a fictional sort of drama that just happened to kind of have a bit more of the energy of like having this biopic nature to it, right? And I feel like for me, when I watched Tar, I think having watched the first 5 minutes of her scenes, I feel like that really solidified that she just won her Oscar for Best Actress once again, because the way that she just really she really gets into her character, right? Like, it's so flawless, it's so natural, it's so raw. It's like you're definitely seeing a whole different person, and the way that Kate Blanchett puts in the performance so effortlessly. I mean, I knew just like by the end of the film that there's just no competition that Kate Blanchett's going to win this award. It's going to win Best Actress. I feel like if there's anyone else who's probably going to be, going to have any sort of, potential of winning. I could see Michelle Lau being any providing any sort of competition, because she did win a Golden Globe for Best Actress on the other category for musical and comedy. And I feel like that's probably where I can see any sort of chance of an upset. But I feel like it's pretty clear cut that it's going to be Kate Blanchett. I mean, there's no arguing about that. Like, it's, you're not just talking about the older voters, but you're talking about just a whole group of, like, Oscar voters who probably have seen Tar and are going to recognize that Blanchett really puts in 100% in this role. Again, I would not be surprised though if Yao puts an upset. I could see a potential upset, but I think that it's pretty clear cut that Blanchett's going to win. I'm not going to be changing this answer anytime soon. So that's kind of my pick so far for the Oscar nominations right there. Again, I think even if some of the leeways of where this category is going to go, I mean, it's pretty clear Blanchett and Yao are pretty safe. Deadweiler, I think, is probably going to get the third spot, as well as Williams. And I think that Coleman, at the end of the day, will get the fifth spot, although that could go anywhere with any other actress getting the nomination for it. All right, and then let's get down to the second to last category, which is Best Director. It's gonna be Steven Spielberg for The Fabelmans, the Daniels for Everything Everywhere All at Once, Martin McDonagh for The Banshees of Inisherin, Todd Field for Tar, and Baz Luhrmann for Elvis. Again, I think this is a pretty solid list. I think this is where I'm gonna be. I feel like this is probably gonna be what we're gonna probably see is going to be the nominations tomorrow. I think Steven and the Daniels are pretty set in stone that they're getting a nomination. I think even Martin McDonagh is pretty set on, just because I think Banshees of Inisherin is going to get a lot of recognition going into the Oscars this year, as well as Todd Fields as well, because again, Tar was just all about direction, right? Baz Luhrmann, I mean, I put Baz Luhrmann as taking the fifth spot. I feel like, again, a lot of the film is all about cinematography, really capturing who Elvis is. I know that, I mean, again, I feel like if there's anybody who has a chance of being kicked out, it's probably gonna be Baz Luhrmann, if it means putting in someone like James Cameron into the final cut, because as you can see, I do not have James Cameron in this list. I just think that it's going to come down to these five, but the competition is going to come down to, of course, Steven Spielberg and the Daniels. Steven Spielberg did win the Golden Globe, while the Daniels won the Critics' Choice. Again, it's going to come down to the DGAs and see where that what ends up happening there, because again, we are dealing with sort of this voting group that determines who can win such and such categories. And if you are aware of how the Oscar works, typically people who are more experienced in those fields are the ones who vote in who's going to win those categories, right? So I'm going to assume that the people who are voting in the DGA are going to be the same voting selected members for the Oscars, who are going to decide upon the best director. For that reason, I did put Steven Spielberg as my top choice, the front runner for winning this award. I do know that the Daniels did win the Critics' Choice, so anything can still happen. But because the Critics' Choice is based upon a group of selected voters from critics, that the voting group for there is going to be very different from the voting group that we're going to see with the DGA and the Golden Globes and Oscars. And in that case, I think that Spielberg is pretty set on with winning Best Director. Is it his greatest film, his greatest directing film? I would say no. I think, of course, there has been so many other films that he's made that are a lot more, immaculate, a lot more memorable. But even in that case, I feel like everyone loves Spielberg to the point where, like, I think this is a case where we're going to see Spielberg take home the award for The Fabelmans, because, again, the movie itself is really personal to Spielberg himself, because it is a semi-autobiographical film. It's basically dedicated of his life, with some, fictionalized changes like the characters' names and all that sort of stuff. But regardless, I think that Spielberg is probably going to be the front runner. I think the Daniels have the strongest chance of really, pulling any sort of upset, as well as McDonagh. But as of the moment, I put Spielberg as my top choice. Again, this could change when we get to the final predictions, but as of the moment, I have Spielberg as my number one pick for winning this category. And then finally, let's get down to the Best Pictures nomination. So unlike some of the other categories that we typically get 5, nominations, this is where we actually have anywhere between 8 to 10. So it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to see all 10 films or all 9 films or all 8 films make it to the final count for best picture or get to the final, selection for best picture. It could come down to a lot of things, right? I think for me, I feel like what I believe are going to be nominated are going to be Everything Ever All at Once, The Banshees and Inisherin, The Fablemans, Top Gun Maverick, Tar, Elvis, Avatar, The Way of Water, All Quiet on the Western Front, Babylon, and Woman Talking. Um, Again, I feel like the ones that are pretty locked in are going to be Everything Ever All at Once, The Banshees, Fablemans, Top Gun, Tar, Elvis, Avatar. I think those are pretty set on with getting a nomination. Typically, when it comes to the Oscars, they're a lot more focused on incorporating more of international films. So that's why I do think the All Quiet Front might be getting a nomination, especially because they are getting a lot of nominations for some of the more technical categories as well. So if that's going to be the case, as well as the fact that they're probably going to be getting a nomination for Best International Film, then it's pretty clear cut that they're going to get a nomination here for Best Picture. So I think that even though I'm not solid with it, I do think that they have a strong chance of getting a spot into the Best Picture. I think the ones that I'm really kind of, unsure about of who might get the last 2 categories, that is if the Oscars ends up doing 10 if they just decide to select 10 films for their final list. I did put Babylon and Woman Talking. I put Babylon because again, I guess they are kind of having a couple of technical, nominations such as Best Sound, Best Production, and because of the fact that this is a film that is dedicated to Hollywood, I'm seeing a lot of older voters really pushing up Babylon with getting a nomination, even though this is a film that kind of got mixed reviews on Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb, like with the critics and audience. I mean, this is gonna be the case where we're gonna have like the Don't Look Up or extremely loud, extremely closer situation where we're gonna have that one film that even though got like mixed reception, it somehow is going to get a spot for Best Picture, and I feel like that's gonna be the case with Babylon, just because Babylon again is really focused on the Hollywood aesthetic, the fact that it is a love letter to Hollywood. Like this is an Oscar baity film, right? And I think that's the reason why I put Babylon as getting the final 10 spot. That's again they go for 10, just because of the fact that it is a film that dedicates itself to kind of incorporating all the Hollywood Oscar bait themes into the film. So that's where I could see that happening. As for Woman Talking, again, like this is a film that I know a lot of people haven't really seen. It's been talked about here and there, especially at the Golden Globes. I'm not sure if they were talked about a lot at the Critics' Choice. Again, a lot of that might come down to like whether or not Woman Talking can get a bit more momentum in some of the other categories. I can see them getting Best Adapted Screenplay for as a nomination. So if that's the case, then I think that's gonna push them up a little bit with of gaining a nomination for Best Picture. I would also not be surprised if Jessie Buckley even grabs a spot for Best Supporting Actress over who did I had put originally like for not Shu but for Chow or anybody like that, right? If she can get a nomination from there, I can see a push for Woman Talking. Again, this is probably gonna be the movie that a lot of people have not talked about. So I think with that being the case, I would not be surprised if we see a finalized 9 list. But if they really do push for a 10, I could see Woman Talking getting the final spot. If not, I would not be surprised about She Said as well. I think that that's probably where, if we're going to get a finalized 10 list, it could be either one of those. But yeah, Woman Talking is one I feel like I'm most unsure about. But again, it comes down to whether or not the Oscars decide to go with an 8 list, a 9 list, a 10 list. It could really come down to just the 8, so that'll cut off Babylon and Woman Talking. But yeah, that's gonna be what I think is going to be the final nomination for Best Picture. In terms of who's going to win, I mean, I feel like this is going to be the case for every Oscar. It's going to be a very tough one, just because any movie can win. There's usually about 2 or 3 films that are definitely the ones are kind of to keep a close eye on. I think in this case, it's going to be between The Fablemans, The Banshees and Inisherin, and Everything Ever All at Once. The Fablemans did win the Golden Globes for Best Picture Drama, I believe. And while I believe Everything Everywhere All at Once won the Critics' Choice, and I think Banshees and Sharon won the Golden Globe as well for Best Picture on the comedy side. So it could really come down to any one of those three films. I think that that's what's going to be the set in stone of what this category is going to be. I think it could just be between Banshees and Sharon and Fablemans, although I personally would want Everything Ever All at Once to win, just because it is such a phenomenal film. I think that that has been a film that I think, is really deserving of winning, especially kind of being a bit different from some of the, Oscar wins that we've seen in the past to win Best Picture, right? But I can also see Banshees and Sharon being one of the stronger contenders as well as the Fablemans, just because it is a bit more catered towards a specific demographic of voters, like the older voters who are more in line to pick movies like the Banshees and Fablemans to win the category. But for now, I just put Everything Ever All at Once as a top, just because that's what my heart would want. But something I'll be keeping an eye on as we get closer to the awards. Yeah, this one's gonna be a really tough one because it could come down to any one of these three films. Even if when we have a big sort of selection of films, I think it's gonna come down to those three, and I think that's where a lot of things are going to be questionable. I mean, I would not be surprised if Banshees ends up winning at the end of the day, because it is a great film. I have seen it. It was in my top 10 film. I believe it was in my top 5 as well. I thoroughly enjoyed Banshees. I thoroughly enjoyed Everything Ever All at Once. I did not have the Fablemans in my top 10, but it is still a great film. But again, I would not be surprised if Banshees ends up being the one to really win it all. But we'll see how it all goes. Again, I feel, as I mentioned before, in the Best Original Screenplay, I feel like that's going to be the one that's going to really determine everything on who's going to win Best Picture, right? I mean, because I believe in statistical sense that whoever wins the screenplay category ends up winning Best Picture, because that basically sets up the sinister of what the story's going to be. It's because of that blueprint that we get these movies, right? Like, that's why they're so great in everything that we do. And without that, like, you cannot get a film like that. And I feel like, again, like, the Best Original screenplay is coming down to Everything Everywhere All at Once and Banshees. We've seen with Everything Everywhere, they have won the Best Screenplay category, I believe, in the Critics' Choice. I think Banshees had won in the Golden Globe. This is where it's going to be really competitive. And I feel like once we see the WGA, I feel like not only that will determine who's going to win the Best Adapted, but I think that once I see that, I think that that's going to basically determine who's going to win Best Picture. Because, again, I think statistically speaking, whoever wins the Best Adapted category is more likely to win Best Picture. So that's going to be something I'm going to keep an eye on for. Again, anything can still change from here with Best Picture, because, again, that's always been the toughest category, no matter what Oscar year it is. That there's typically about 2 films that are kind of neck and neck to each other. I believe last year was Coda and I can't remember what the other film was, but I know I put Coda in as the winner, and I was totally right about it. I mean, typically speaking, the way I strategize with who I think is going to win, I'm pretty set on about 70% of the time being correct on it, at least from the last decade. Like last year again, I did pick Coda. Coda did win. I remember Moonlight had won over La La Land, and that was my pick as well. Yeah, so I mean, we're gonna see kind of how it all kind of goes through with Best Picture. But yeah, that's all I really have to say about it. Just again, I'll be keeping an eye on and seeing how everything works out in some of the more separate awards that we're awards ceremonies that we're gonna see, whether it be the WGA, the DGA, the SAGs that we're gonna have very soon. And then once we do get to Oscar night, I'll be giving up my final predictions from there. I mean, I'm really excited to see what films do get nominated tomorrow. But yeah, that's what my final picks are for this. I think that this is what I think are going to be the nominations, and what I think they're going to be nominated for tomorrow when they do get called out tomorrow. But yeah, that's all I have to really say about my predictions for Oscar nominations 2023. Let me know what you think. What are your thoughts? What are your picks? Who do you think are going to be winning? Who are going to be getting, who are going to be getting the spots for some of the big awards of the night, especially the big 6? Do you think there's going to be any upsets, some of the more shocking, some of the more surprises? Who do you think is going to be snubbed? Who do you think is going to be missing out on the who you think that recognition should have been given, but baffling enough was not. What are some updates you think are happening? As well as the fact that if you do already have your final picks for who's going to win the Oscars, let me know. But yeah, that's all I have to really say about that. Let me know what you think in the comments down below, and make sure to like and subscribe.